Hey everyone, it's Mike with It's Pittsfield Tonight. I am here with Dina Lampiasi. Dina is our Pittsfield Ward 6 City Councilor. Dina, thank you for taking the time to do this tonight.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. I know this is long overdue, so I'm really glad we've finally had a chance to connect. And I guess, Dina, for those who are not familiar with you, if you just want to go ahead and introduce yourself as their city councilor and what your role is in the city.
I'm Dina Lampiasi. I'm the city councilor for Ward 6. I was elected in this last cycle in 2019. And I've really enjoyed this first term as city councilor. It's been an experience serving everybody in an international pandemic. But for somebody like myself who genuinely loves policy, government, and community work, it's something that I feel grateful to be part of every day. Yeah, was that what you asked? Did I leave anything out there?
Now, I know on your last, when you first ran for office, things were still pretty normal in the country. Sure. This time around, what are you able to go out and door knock again and engage with people again?
You know, I am somebody that really likes door knocking. I love talking to residents kind of on their turf, learning what they care about, you know, kind of catching them in their element. I think you have really genuine interactions that way. I love community events, and the pandemic just made none of that possible, right? And considering, you know, the vulnerability of some of our populations, I haven't knocked on doors this year, just because I know that the residents I've talked to on the phone, a lot of them are still kind of leery about it. There are those that say, you know, I'm vaccinated, let's pick things up and move on. And you just don't really know how somebody feels. And the last thing I want to do is offend them at the door, make them uncomfortable. But I have been making phone calls to residents. And I think, you know, for folks that maybe even feel vulnerable in their house, that's also a better way to connect with them. And those have been really helpful.
Are there any like certain key issues that you're hearing from the constituents more than others, or?
So I will say that it kind of depends on what's happening. If we've had a rain event, we'll certainly be talking about flooding. And I think that's probably true for a lot of councilors right now in the wet season. But overall, I would say that I've had a lot of conversations about pedestrian safety, the condition of our roads, not always just pothole related, but you know, folks noticing that the stop line is back too far and they feel unsafe when they have to breach out, things like that, things that, you know, you kind of take for granted in your day-to-day, and you just notice like that should be a little bit different.
I've gotten a lot of messages myself on bridges. That's when I hear a lot of, and I know some of the bridges are city, some are state, some are railroad. Are you hearing some of that?
So in my ward, I don't get as much about bridges, but I have had bridge questions, and those have been specific to out in like the church, not the church hall, the like Fort Hill area. And for me, it's not a huge topic. I think for other counselors, it's larger. And then the rest of it is like regular city councilor stuff. You know, I read this thing in the paper. Can you explain it more for me? You know, I've got this culvert. It's an issue. Can you help me out with it? These are that's the reality of the job of a city councilor, right? You never really know what's going to come your way, and you're kind of working on different issues all the time. I think too that it depends a lot on the ward, the geographic area of the ward. We all have different problems based on that. Sometimes the timing of when things were updated in certain wards, like I know Ward 5 has had so much road work being done lately, and that's because it wasn't done for a long time. The problems that one ward might have with their roads, another ward doesn't. So we're all really unique in that way.
And your ward, I think, is one of the wards that is kind of a mixed ward as far as income. You know, out Churchill and all that way, you have a lot of higher income homes, and it's more, I guess, rural. And
Yeah.
then your ward also runs into some of the lower income wards or more urban income. Does that create a challenge for you, or are there
Not
a
a
mix
challenge
of
at all.
issues?
It's actually, if we're going to call it a challenge, it's something I welcome. When I first ran, I still am really focused on making sure that every neighborhood is heard equally. You know, we hear a lot about homeowners wanting to know that their taxes are, you know, really coming back to them and that they're getting the services they're paying for. But we don't often talk about the renters and the neighborhood conditions that they're living in, and the conditions of their streets. And often what I'm hearing from people is about dumping, concerns about dumping, concerns about blighted properties, things like that. And those are honestly some of my favorite things to work on. And that's just because it's to the people that call, it's such a heavy weight. Sometimes it takes so much for them to call. It's not just a pothole that's bothering them. You know, it's not just a stop sign. It's that their child is walking to school and they're walking past a home with just garbage piled up outside all week, and they're not, you know, using proper receptacles. Like, these are things that I believe place matters, and we can make conditions better in those neighborhoods.
I definitely think the garbage issue is one that's going to be back. And I think that's a big one, because you're right. There are certain neighborhoods on trash day where it's a mess, and depending on the weather, some of that trash quickly ends up all over the place.
Yeah, and it's something that when I receive these calls from folks, it's, you know, it's a sanitary issue. It's a morale issue. Nobody wants to see that. And when I'm able to help address it, it feels good. I'm happy that I've made their walk to school or their walk to work better. But it's work that's never done because we haven't really addressed the underlying problems yet.
Now, another big issue that's been in the forefront, I've discussed a lot,
Sure.
is violence in our public schools and the role of school resource officers. I'm personally a big proponent of resource officers, and I say this every time. I get that a resource officer is not a cure-all, but I believe it is an important part of the school, or should be. Do you have a view on that?
You know, I know that there are some that are staunchly against them. I don't feel that way. You know, I also don't know that I know actually that they're not the solution to all of our problems, but they can be a small part of the overall solution. One of the things that often comes up for those who oppose SROs is, how often are they the ones to stop this bad behavior? They can't be everywhere all the time. They often don't interrupt the shooter themselves. They often don't interrupt the fight themselves. But I think that's kind of a narrow view of the role of an SRO. Like, we can really view it as a way to help form better relationships with students that folds into a broader program with, you know, better resources for the kids, better on-site counselors, better access to psychologists when needed at school. All of those things, I think, come together. And it's also an opportunity for us to kind of take down some of those walls, I think, for communities that don't typically have strong relationships with officers, and that historically haven't trusted them for reasons that are valid. You know, I think taking the right step forward and improving those relationships and resources is something that we as a community should do. But also, you know, the superintendent signed an MOU for SROs to go back into the schools this year. So there's that. Like, it's supposed to be happening. We're not in the same position that we were in the past.
Right, and I do know that I've heard from certain officers that staffing within the department is an issue, and having, you know, because it's, I know Chief Wynn at one of the council meetings said, you know, it can't be just anybody. It takes a certain type of officer, and then that officer has to go through a separate type of training and so on. But today we saw something nationally that, it was scary to see that happen. It happened in Texas. I did do some research on that, and I did see that on their school website, they did have listed 2 officers. They weren't listed as SROs, but they were listed as police officers as part of the staff, I believe. That's how I read it anyway.
Okay.
But that was a situation where they're not calling that a school shooting. They're calling it a shooting at school because it was a fight among students. And then one of them happened to have a weapon with him that he got into the school, and that's how that took place. And
Yeah.
that some of the violence we saw in Pittsfield, because someone filmed it. And I know that's an issue too. I don't know how I feel about that, because I know the superintendent, at least in the paper, he said that those students, if you film it, if you're caught filming it, you'll also be suspended. But at the same time, we wouldn't be talking about this if someone didn't film that. So
Yeah.
that's a tricky one too. And we spoke earlier, and I do think that the school committee and the city council, we need to find a way to get both of those together more often, because I know that city councilors are hearing this probably more than the school committee is right now. And it seems like the school committee is more of the decision maker on that.
I think that's accurate. I agree that we don't have enough of a collaborative relationship. I think it would be helpful to have more joint meetings, or also for the community to know this valuable position that exists, which is the school committee, and to contact their school committee members and to have those conversations with them. I also think that an important element of this too is, what are we expecting teachers to be able to do for our students? Are we equipping them with the tools they need and the training they need? No teacher should have to, play all of the roles that they play in the modern day. When you go to school to be a teacher, it's because you want to teach. You know that there's going to be difficult things that you deal with students, and I'm sure you hope that, you can do it to the best of your ability and learn how to do that, but they're not trained to break up fights. They shouldn't be. They shouldn't be in physical danger when they go to work. And I think having somebody there that can, I don't know. I understand both sides, but the system we have now is not working.
That we can agree with.
What happened the other day was not acceptable, and we need more trained people there to help our youth and there to help our educators. Like, that's the bottom line for me. And however we get there, we get there. And in no way does that mean militarize our school. It means give them the resources they need to keep people safe and let the kids learn.
Right. And also, hence, resource officer. So I guess if any, what would you say? I know it was your first term, so it was an unusual one for first term counselor.
Sure.
Is there any certain thing or certain issue that you feel was a big accomplishment or at the forefront of your term?
At the beginning, I was like really focused on working on some education things with another counselor. We had some ideas spinning, and we met with the superintendent on this foreign language initiative that we wanted to see happen. And COVID happened, and the conversations just kind of stopped. So that kind of took the wind out of the sails a little bit, I think, in terms of like the big initiatives. And just through the course of this last year and a half, it's been conversation after conversation about pedestrian safety, that for me in my ward, now I drive around and I'm just like that. And I'm noticing these things all the time, just thinking about them differently and talking to the engineers and finding ways to help folks with mobility issues and people who ride bikes or walk places to get where they need to go and to feel safely. And drivers too, like we have driving issues in Ward 6. And I think that, my kind of diving into this area is something that I can be proud of and know that I've really made a difference for some people.
Okay. Now, I know if reelected, I know that there's a lot on the table. We have federal funding coming in, state funding coming in, and a lot of the big projects all at once we're discussing. We're discussing a new police department. We're discussing the wastewater treatment plant, different ways and how we should be spending some of this assistance money, which is around the 40 million mark. And then, of course, the William Stanley Business Park is back in discussion. So do you feel coming back in, if reelected, that it's going to be one of those terms that a lot of this is going to be a lot more active than the normal?
Yeah, and that's actually something I'm really looking forward to. This year there were certain delays with various, things that we were working on, bigger projects that were coming, and having this opportunity, if elected, to be at the table and participate in those decisions is really important to me. I'm really sorry about that.
I've got two of them right here.
I think he's done. Sorry.
Mine are smaller.
he's got a big voice. So it's also like, I feel strongly that, making poor financial decisions, kicking the can down the road is these are things that my generation as a millennial, we're kind of disgruntled about. We're a little bit upset that we keep getting the bill for things that weren't dealt with 20, 30 years ago. And that sort of feeds into my overall philosophy on government and how I view things for the city and the work I want to do. We just have to tackle these big issues, and we need to be thinking about how we're doing it, how it's going to impact us today, sure, but how is it going to impact us in 20 years? And are we giving another generation the bill?
Right. And I know one of the issues being discussed also is the schools, as far as our population. And, we have this big, beautiful new school at Taconic. And then we have PHS, which is, it's a landmark, but it's got issues. I have my own view on that. One of my views on that is to put high school back to the way it used to be, which was 10th, 11th, and 12th, do away with middle school, bring back junior high. So now you have up to 9th grade at junior high. And I think you can make that work. That's just one way of looking at it. But as a city councilor, and I'm sure you're going to hear that probably from other people, but do you feel like if reelected, that is another one that's going to be something we do have to tackle sooner than later?
This is something that it's another one of those topics that has been on the table for a long time, and it kind of just keeps getting pushed out. I think that as a community, we have to start thinking about this very seriously and start having the conversations to look at the different options. In the same way, when we talk about, do we need a new police station? Is that an appropriate space for law enforcement and victims to be going to do the work that they have to do there, right? And is PHS an appropriate space for children to be learning, for our high schoolers to be learning? Is it modernized? Is it safe? Is it conducive to learning in 2021? All of these things have to be considered. What is the tax burden to the city to continually repair, right? We have to figure it out. And I think too, that a lot of
do we have the students to maintain both high schools?
Do we have the students? Sure. And then I think too, that a lot of the angst around some of these discussions that get pushed down the road is because we never complete them. Or we start the conversation and it gets a little bit difficult and we stop. I think that we all know that change is difficult, but when we talk about things and we know that it's coming, it becomes a little bit easier when you understand what has to be done and what's at stake if you don't do it.
Okay. Well, in closing, is there, I guess, what would you say to your constituents, why they should reelect you, and how they can contact you if they have any questions they want to ask you?
Yeah, so to the Ward Sixers out there that are watching, I've really enjoyed serving you over this last year, and I sincerely hope that you will reelect me. on November 2nd, first Tuesday of the month. And you can reach me on my cell phone anytime, 413-433-8654. And for city council business, you would want to reach me at dlampiasi@citypittsfield.org.
And do you have
all that-
like campaign pages or anything like that, social media pages?
Yeah, of course. I have a social media page. I think the official name is Ward 6 Councilor Dina Lampiasi. You can find me there. If you want to email me about campaign related things, it's votedina, DINA @gmail.com.
Okay.
There are a million ways that you can find me, folks.
Okay. And
Yep.
one last thing, I'm just going to throw this out there. I am putting another rally together at Park Square this coming Friday in support of SROs. And I just wanted to invite you, if you are free, it's from 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. I'd love to see you there if you can make it.
Thank you for the invitation.
Okay.
I will try to make it if possible when I get out of work. And this is a true story. We're celebrating my wife's birthday with her family, and we're going to an out-of-town dinner. So if the timing works, I will be there.
Okay.
But chances are probably not on my side.
Okay. Well, I'm glad we finally had the opportunity to do this. I'd love to have you come back on before Election Day. But thank you again very, very much for taking the time. And I'm glad we finally got to have a conversation.
Thank you. I was happy to be here. It was good to talk to you.
All right. I will talk to you soon, Dina.
Have a good one.
You too.